in this garden. And crazy things over here. Check it out though. First year with this sort of thing. These guys are filled. I just picked my battles, I guess, how much they've grown. Good morning, welcome back to Sage and Stone Homestead. My name is Heather. The garden looks a little bit different than it did the last time. I got the winter stuff moved out, most of it, and the spring and summer stuff moved in. This is where I did have the broccoli. I think we harvested some in the last tour, but now we have tomatoes, and the tomatoes have really taken off since I put them in here. They've been in the ground a little bit over a week at this point, and I stuck these cages over them just to protect them from my dog and my cats that like to enter the garden sometimes. Oh, look. This is a volunteer elephant garlic, and it's already putting up a garlic scape. These are actually delicious. I'll harvest that later. Garlic scapes, it's just the base of that flowering head that comes up in the hardneck garlic varieties. And it's got a very mild garlicky flavor. Really good though, especially in scrambled eggs. Looks like we have quite a bit of volunteer elephant garlic in this bed. I've grown elephant garlic here intentionally once, and then, you know, apparently I leave some corms or some cloves or even some full bulbs in the ground by accident, and this is what we get. So I only have one tomato planted in this bed. It looks like it's outgrowing its little basket already. Oh yeah, and this elephant garlic has escaped too. 'Tis the season. These cabbages have actually gotten a lot bigger over the last little while. I think we might actually get heads out of them. We had a pretty intense freeze this past winter after I had already moved out my starts, my spring and summer frost tolerant starts, and the broccoli survived pretty well, but that was basically it. We got some scragglers from other varieties to include that cabbage. And over here we have some purple of Sicily cauliflower that are actually looking pretty decent right now too. A lot of this stuff has really blown up in the last couple of days, and I'm guessing it's because we've got some pretty consistent warm weather. Now I noticed just a little bit of brown stuff on the leaf there. We may be starting to see cabbage loopers come in and start eating this stuff. So far it doesn't look too bad. The little brown granules are caterpillar poop. There's not a lot of it right now, but I'm gonna keep watch. So yeah, as far as tomatoes in the garden, what I have in this front garden are Heat Master tomatoes. These are a determinate hybrid tomato that only gets about 4 feet high, except for I did put in one Dr. Witchy's. That one is indeterminate orange heirloom variety. The tomatoes that I have over here are also Heat Masters. This one graduated from its cover because it got really big. I don't know what kind of nutrition that tapped into, but it's looking good. You can see I haven't really done much in this U-shaped bed. I did start my maypop seeds this week. They're in the greenhouse. We'll check on them. I don't think they're probably up yet, but I do have some volunteer sunflowers that I left in here, and I think I am gonna try to baby them over the season. Why not? When I get the soil in this bed, I can work the maypops, you know, around them. Over here in this U-shaped bed, we have the blackberries on one side. These are thornless blackberries, and I'm noticing we're getting some buds. So it won't be long before we see flowers and then berries. Funny thing that I noticed though the other day is I have this massive volunteer kale plant in here. This is a Ragged Jack or Red Russian kale, and I think I'm actually gonna harvest this to have with dinner tonight. Speaking of volunteer plants, there's a bunch of tomatoes right there. There's a bunch of tomatoes down here. There's a bunch of tomatoes in the bed. And depending on how many of my maypop seeds happen to come up, I may leave this side, the volunteer tomato side, and put the maypops and let them establish on this side this year. I have talked about having just a strictly volunteer garden one year. I may do that, I may not. It's kind of nerve-wracking to think about. Look at that one. Beautiful. So yeah, this is gonna be kind of a fun leave it and see kind of experiment. The green stalk on this side of the garden is fully loaded, almost, with the dwarf style or miniature tomatoes. I noticed that some of these that I got from Wild Boar Farms have already started to put on the little flower buds. So that is amazing. We will have fruit set in no time out here. There's a couple of cups here that look empty. I put some Peruviana zinnia over here. There's only 3 cups that I didn't have dwarf tomato starts for. Most of the tomatoes in here are the Tiny Tim variety, a red tomato, but there are some other varieties in here. And I have them labeled. So that one's Tiny Tim. That one says Dynamite. I believe this one is called raspberry, something like that. Limelight. As you can see, I managed to weed whack this week. It's looking a lot better in this garden. We are not far away at all from seeing the Callaway golden chamomile flowers from opening. These guys are perennial and they came back really well this year, filling out the bed quite a lot. This makes me really happy to see. I've got a space down here that needs something. I'm going to the greenhouse today and I'm gonna pick up something. Not quite sure yet. And it looks like it is time to harvest the oregano. What do you think? This oregano gets a few good haircuts every year. I will just come and chop it down and put it in the freeze dryer, and then it grows back really well. Hi, sir, what are you doing? You come to join us? As you can see, we've got a lot of dill popping up in the garden, and I wanted that. I had actually put the dill over here last year and let it go to seed, and my hopes and dreams are coming true for it. Lots of dill. Have you guys noticed these wild and crazy things over here? These are my walking onions, and this is what they do. No, dude, that is what you do, but we're not okay with it. Go. I moved him to the sacrificial bed. These guys put on little babies at the top of these flower stalks, and what they do is they'll bend this down and put it near the soil, and this will create a new cluster of perennial onion plants. Isn't that neat? So that's where they get their name, walking onions. They kind of walk along in the garden that way, and that's how they spread. So that's very, very cool. Neat to see it in action. Whenever I come into the garden for any reason, I make a point to pick at least 3 weeds. At this time in the year, it needs to be much, much more, but it helps me keep on top of things, you know, at least a little bit. Our Carlos muscadine grapes up here on the trellis are lovely looking. I noticed that we have all kinds of little Wilby berry clusters. That's where the flowers are going to come on. There are tons and tons of these little clusters. I'm really, really excited. Last year was the first year we put these in, and they did set some little berries. It was a little bit late in the season for them to do so, and so we didn't get to actually harvest them to eat, but we'll be able to harvest this year. Super excited. Hoping that the birds leave them alone. I think that we should do okay, especially with this dude around. The cats can be annoying, but they also have a job and they do their job quite well, so it's a give and take. The strawberry bed is lush and lovely, and we have noticed that some of the berries are starting to turn red. We can see one down here. See that? I've harvested some strawberries out of the greenhouse, but I don't think anyone has harvested any out here quite yet. The greenhouse is going to be a little bit further along just because it's more consistently warmer earlier in the season in there. The asparagus bed is starting to do its wild and crazy thing because I tend to leave the stalks that are either pencil sized or a little bit thinner than pencil sized and allow them to frond out like this. We are starting to see little flower buds on the asparagus. See? This one must be a female asparagus. There are female and male asparagus plants, if you didn't know. I know that the male plants tend to put out more shoots. Maybe because the female plants are worried about setting seed, because really that's all plants want to do. So yeah, we'll get some of the flowers and little red berries soon, but the berries are toxic. These berries are not toxic though. These are our legacy blueberries. These were also put in last year. We did not get near as much fruit set last year, which was to be expected, but look at it all. There are so many blueberries on these plants, and we very well may have to cover them from the birds, but again, we will see. Check it out though. I put this tomato cage in here because I noticed I had a volunteer tomato down there, and I really don't have a plan of anything to put here, and I figured why not. So we've got a tomato right down there. I believe that this is probably a yellow currant tomato, and so I'm just gonna let it grow up here, and that'll be pretty cool in the back of the garden. There's a volunteer tomato here too. There's volunteer tomatoes basically everywhere. Back here, I have a goal to set this bed up this week. This is where I'm going to be planting some roselle. And over here, I did plant some Jerusalem artichoke, also known as sunchoke. I ordered these Jerusalem artichoke tubers off of Etsy and they came really fast. I'll put the shop link down below. They were all healthy and they all I wanted to say germinated, but they all established, so they all set up some greens really well, and so I'm happy. This is our first year with this sort of thing. I don't know if I'll be making any kind of harvest to ferment and eat this year, but we will at least enjoy the blooms. The Jerusalem artichoke is like a tall, small-ish headed sunflower. Really pretty. I'm excited to see it and to have the option for that kind of food here. This whole space, really, I would like to have mostly perennial plants in, and we're slowly getting there. These 2 grapes I got last year, these are Sunbelt grapes, which is a Concord variety, and just like the other side, we have a lot of clusters for this season. This grape last year really only grew just the center stalk, and this year we're training it laterally this way. It grows really fast, so I need to keep on top of it. These guys here are the Romeo and Juliet cherries. This one's Juliet, and that one is Romeo. I think only Romeo flowered this year, and we need both of them to flower for them to set fruit. I am pretty sure. These were put in last year. Ooh, I might have lied. Look at that. Do we have one little Romeo cherry? It does kind of look like it. That's funny. I guess we'll let it. It's not going to hurt it. It's just one little cherry. While we're talking about the fruit trees though, I'll show you our fruit trees in the front yard. We've got a couple different varieties of things, and we are going to be getting fruit out of some of our trees this year that we've had in the ground for quite a while. So over here we have a couple of pear trees on either side of this chicken tractor. This one is one of those grafted pear trees that's got several different varieties on one rootstock. I think it was supposed to have 4 varieties, but one of the varieties, it had died and dropped off. So for now, it is just the Bartlett and the Flemish Beauty. This one down here might have been something else, but the tag fell off. However, doesn't really matter. I do have some little pears. See that? It's a little baby pear. Look at that. Isn't that so neat? This will be our first year for pears. This one is a Moonglow pear, and I'm pretty sure we put this one in 2020. It's quite tall. It's probably 12 feet tall up there, and there are pears. I have seen them, not necessarily further down. A lot of the fruit set is on the top. I think you can kind of see one little pear right there. They'll probably be easier to tell once they get a little bit bigger, but there's pears on this guy too. We have a persimmon. This is an American persimmon right here. This is not going to be probably setting any fruit this year. That is okay. There is actually an American persimmon across the street that we do get persimmons from. That's why we stuck this one here. It will need another persimmon to pollinate, and that one should be close enough. We also have a couple of apple trees. There's this one here that I got last year, and there's one right there. That one did not flower this year. This is a Sweet 16 apple. And the one that is setting some fruit this year is a different variety. It says Gallant. I can't find any information about that apple. I think it's probably a Gala. And Gala apples, according to the internet, are self-fertile. And so that would make sense as to why that one didn't flower. This one did, and we still have a tiny bit of fruit set. So there's at least one apple right here. It's pretty neat to see them as tiny little babies. There's one here. These guys, like I said, I put them in last year. They may not set this fruit and keep it to maturity, but we'll see. There's another little apple right there. There's quite a few little apples. So yeah, we'll see. I thought that was interesting. I also do have some elderberry in the front and this magnolia tree, which has not flowered for me yet, but I guess it takes some time. This is what the blackberries look like from this side. Wild and crazy, but I love it. I have a couple beds here. Now, these ones, I really just have this bee balm in the middle. That's what I want to keep. I've got some little cactus down in the bottom of these beds here. It's been very hard to weed around them. It's actually kind of scary. And I've talked about just taking these out, like the cactus and all, and putting the soil somewhere else and restarting. I didn't do it this year. We'll see if I get to it. This bed has potatoes, and this guard that I put here is for my cats because they were digging in this bed pretty badly. But I do have this volunteer squash in here, which I was not sure wasn't a pumpkin, but I don't think so. It kind of looks like it's probably a bush variety. I'm guessing it's patty pan. We should know pretty soon. Speaking of though, I can't believe I didn't show you this. So we'll come back here underneath the muscadines. I do have another squash volunteering down here. I saw this while I was weeding. That one might be a pumpkin. We'll have to see. Last year, where my pigs are at right now, I grew a ton of pumpkins. It was 14 of the Dutch fork pie pumpkin plants, and I harvested 80 pumpkins out of the pumpkin patch, and we gave a ton away. We ate a ton. We gave a ton out to the animals and things as supplemental feed, and I did roast some of the seeds and keep them, but a lot of them I just put out here in the compost bin, and birds and things will carry those around, and I'm really hoping to see at least a couple of those volunteer around here. I love me some volunteer plants. Down here by our rabbits, we also have this grapevine, which technically was a volunteer as well. When we moved in here, it was growing up right there, and the previous owner said she didn't plant it. There is a vineyard near here, and she said that they have gotten grapes from that vineyard before, and she's guessing that it's from there. And we will see, at least we'll be able to know a little bit more about what type they could be. I'm sure I could ask up at the vineyard. I don't know them myself, those people, but you know, I guess we could find out somehow. They're probably wine grapes, but I'm sure we could use them for other things too. The kids' garden is fully planted. We're gonna shut off the anti-cat device and get in here. So we have 4 children, and each child has their own square bed with a trellis, and then they've got some beds and a green stalk that they share. The green stalk I had tried to fill with strawberries fully. They didn't all take. I had ordered the strawberries off of Etsy, so we've got some dead ones up here. They do feel kind of firm, but I don't know. If these guys established and those ones didn't yet, I don't think they're going to. So when we go to the greenhouse later, I'm sure we'll get some things to fill in here. But they do have a couple little tomatoes. This is actually, that's a volunteer lettuce from last year. There's a whole bunch of it actually kind of growing amongst the clover down here. But yeah, we stuck in some peppers, a tomato, and it's gonna be a little variety in here. Speaking of volunteers, they had quite a few ground cherries volunteer and come up in this bed. So that is what this is dedicated to this year. They love ground cherries, we all do. And then over here, we put in some cucamelons. They're trying to establish. I had started these from seed in a start pot and just moved them over, so they're gonna be a little while before they really get going. So each child has planted their bed. I believe Molly has some zinnia going here, some cucumbers. She's got a tomato right there, peppers and tomatoes over here in Shika's bed. And if you see this little guy in the middle of the bed, I'll tell you what this is. This is actually a terracotta pot called an Oya. It's actually quite big, and it's a water reservoir. Because it's made from terracotta, it's porous. It will actually leach out the water that I put in it slowly to help keep the bed watered. It helps the kids in keeping up with watering their garden. It makes it a little bit less work. I want a couple of Oyas actually in some of my spots where I don't have irrigation, so I think I'll be ordering more of those pretty soon. While the plants are still small and establishing, they do need to water overhead, but once the plants really get big and get going, the roots will actually grow towards the Oya and like wrap around the Oya to get moisture. Bentley over here has some peppers and some cucumbers. Addison has tomatoes and some flowers, and the pigs sound like they're ready for breakfast. So yeah, obviously I didn't make it over here with the weed whacker yesterday. That is a today job before it rains. But their garden is planted. Now we just take care of it. This is a new space as of this year. Our rose arbor with a picnic table underneath. I did finally plant this rose. I got it last year. It hasn't budded or flowered yet, but I did fertilize in this little mini bed here that I got. It's one of these Radiant Perfume. Like I said, the rose is yellow, and this climbing rose back here is also yellow when it flowers. Oh look, it's giving us a tiny little rose right now. These roses themselves, each flower really isn't very big. This is the Lady Banks rose, but it will put on clusters of little flowers that make it look like a big pom-pom of roses. They really only flower once a season, and it's past its peak right now. So I'm happy that we got a little tiny flower down there. It's not fully open, but I don't expect to really see this in full bloom until next year. But yeah, this rose is gonna climb all over this arbor. We're gonna put some more wiring at the top and let it climb all over the top. And this is gonna be really, really nice in just a few years. I have another rose variety over here that does cause some tension on the channel because this is an invasive species. I've got a lot of random invasive species here on my farm. This is a multiflora rose and they can spread quite vigorously. I've got a couple of them actually on our property, but they do have medicinal property. So I figure, like, if life gives you lemons, make some lemonade. I mean, all this buttercup that you see, this is all an invasive species. We do have Dutch white clover, which is an invasive species. We have a lot of Japanese knotweed, which is an invasive species. We do what we can to get the native varieties up and going, but also, like I said, this has medicinal properties. We can make tea out of the flowers. It does set rose hips when the flowers are gone, and we plan on collecting those. So far, it hasn't bothered me that it's here. I've actually kind of tended it and taken care of it. Some people said that I'm going to regret that. So far, I haven't. These actually smell lovely. I believe Kaylee with the Homestead has a whole video on multiflora rose and the medicinal properties. I'll make sure to link that. So over here by the greenhouse, I set up 2 more of those little baby beds over here. I believe they're called tree surrounds by Epic Gardening. I haven't put the cherries in here yet. These are Nanking cherries, but I need my husband's help making sure that they are spaced properly from the side of the greenhouse. These guys have gotten quite big this year and they're going to get even bigger. I do believe that there is a little bit of fruit set on these. The fruit right now is green, so it's hard to see, but now there's 2 different types. They both did flower early in the season, but they were both in the greenhouse. Sometimes flowers or things that need pollinators don't do super great inside the greenhouse, especially early in the season, because it's hard for the pollinators to see what's going on in there and to know that there's something in there for them. I'm trying to remember where I saw some of the little Nanking cherries, but when they're ripe and ready, they're going to be bright red, and so we'll be able to see them. There's a couple in there. Now, before we go into the greenhouse, we're going to head up the lane because I did some work on the lane this week. I had a goal of getting the 2 beds that I had sitting in my driveway all winter. I had to get them built and to get them filled. And I did so this week, so yay. The goal has been met, and I've been waiting for rain and waiting for rain and waiting for rain. I don't have irrigation set up here yet, and I really want the sky to drench these beds. We do have a 90-something% chance of rain today, so I'm hopeful. This is where I plan on putting a lot of my indeterminate tomatoes. Need to get some trellises, but these guys are filled. And at the end, I have my gherkins, and it looks like something has come and chewed off that one. But I've got one there, and one there, and these guys look okay, but that is not super uncommon for way out here. Could be any number of critter, maybe a rat or something. That's why we have our cats, but they don't always make it out this far. They kind of hang around the house and that front garden. I may decide to replant that with another gherkin, but I may just stick a tomato where that gherkin was. Next time we have a garden tour, there's gonna be more happening down on this end because I did start some seeds and they're in the greenhouse, so let's go in there. This tall stuff that you see, it's called curly dock, and I tend to leave it because it's one of those things that will transport nutrients from further down into the soil and bring it up higher. I can't remember exactly what that type of plant is called. Nutrient transporter, probably, something like that. But what I can do is chop and drop these leaves, and the nutrition that the taproot will have brought up from way deep down in the ground is now available to plants and things at the surface. We're trying to work on slowly remediating our soil, which includes not spraying things. This land was sprayed for many years, and allowing things like this to naturally do their job. And so a lot of things might look kind of messy around my farm, but it's intentionally messy for this kind of reason. And let's be real, I am a little bit lazy when it comes to worrying about what's going on in a non-planting space. I just pick my battles, I guess, and it helps. Like, it's enabling to know that some of these plants are doing good work. Yeah, so far, no germination on the maypops. I had saved that seed myself and scarified it, and here's to hoping. It's probably been a week since I put them in there. This is where my roselle is. So far, no germination there, and these are extra cucamelons. Up here I have 3 different varieties of cowpeas that I planted. There's purple hull, pink eye, black eye peas, and chicken and dumplings cowpeas. And that's what's gonna go on that end of the lane over there. It's where I grew them last year. They did really well until my irrigation broke and I didn't know it. So yeah, I am gonna be putting new irrigation out there this year too. Here's my slicer tomatoes, my heirlooms. Well, this is a strawberry, but these guys, they're ready to go out on the lane as soon as it gets a good drenching rain. I replanted this area with more lima beans. I had planted lima beans earlier in the season and it looked like roly-polies came and got them. And so hopefully we get some more lima beans here really soon, but I have a volunteer tomato. And on this side of the trellis, these are my armpit melons. They're not growing super fast. I think it's taking them a while to get down, to get their roots down into the nutrition of the soil, but they are getting bigger and bigger every week. I noticed that the ones on this side are growing a little bit slower than the ones on this side, and I did try to grow some lettuce greens on this side of the trellis this past fall, and so these guys may need some feeding. Really, these guys may as well. But I'm trying to avoid feeding the plants in here until I really know that they need it, because I'm pretty sure I overfed last year and that contributed to a very serious aphid and whitefly problem in my greenhouse last year that I have not seen evidence of this year. So I'm trying to keep it to a manageable level for sure. We're just gonna wait and see still on those. Because as you may have noticed when we walked in here, spaghetti squash have really taken off from last time. I will put a clip in here of how small these were 2 weeks ago, and you can see just how much they've grown. It is crazy. I said, oh, they'll probably be growing by next time. Yeah, they're, you know, 3 feet up the trellis at this point. I do have this one over here that's really tiny. I took some pictures and I'll put them in here. This guy had some damage, which I'm guessing is from roly-polies. And in order to try to kind of convince this plant to set out more roots further up the stem, I laid down the damaged parts and covered them with soil and mulch, hoping that the plant would push out more roots so that it could grow a little bit better, but it is significantly further behind its neighbors, but that's okay. That's one reason I plant so much, is because I need to plan to lose some to either things like that or disease or whatever. I just want to pretty much guarantee that I'll get a harvest, and planting a lot is how I do that. Because yeah, there's 8 spaghetti squash here. That's going to be more than enough to get what we need as far as spaghetti squash goes. Over on this side of this spaghetti squash trellis, I have some beans. They're doing really well. These guys have really taken off. These are the Kalima bush beans. I have some cleaning up of the walkway to do in here, so just ignore that. It's curly dock. Remember, it's bringing up nutrients. I did have to kind of bend back some of these weeds to make sure that they weren't shading out my onions and things that I have here. The onions are doing really well. I have not fertilized beyond the initial bit of sulfur that I put down when I planted the onions. And that is for the same reason that I talked about with my melon beds. I'm concerned about creating a nutrient imbalance. Now, I haven't tested the soil at all in here to figure out where the soil balance is at. I've just sort of been reading my plants to try to be able to tell. And from what I understand, when you're growing a bulbing onion, you are looking for anywhere between about 10 or 12 leaves on the plants to get a decent sized onion. Each leaf that the onion plant puts on represents 1 layer of onion. And so the more leaves that you have, in theory, the more layers you have, and you know, the bigger the onion. And I was down here looking and trying to count on some of these onions. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There are 12 leaves on that onion plant, which from what I understand is pretty darn ideal. So I don't feel like I need to be putting down more nitrogen in these beds, because the onion plants have been creating a good number of leaves with the nitrogen that was already in the beds. So far I'm still leaving it. And the onions are kind of getting to the point where I feel like they're going to be starting their second phase of growth pretty soon, which is the bulbing. So we'll see. I have noticed just a couple of the onions trying to set flowers. This really isn't what you want, but for the number of onions that I have in here, this is only the 3rd little onion flower that I will have snapped off. As far as I know, snapping off the flower doesn't do anything. Like, it doesn't make the onion decide that it's not at that phase of growth. Onions are biennial plants, so they will grow the first year and get really big, and then the second year they'll set their seed. Sometimes when you buy onion sets at the store, those onions have been out of the ground long enough or in storage long enough where they kind of trick themselves into thinking that they have gone through a winter and that they are in their second season when you plant them. So a lot of like those little round baby onions that you buy at the store, those are going to flower, and it doesn't hurt the onion at all. This flower stalk penetrates the bulb and it will affect the storage ability of that onion. All the onions in here, I say all of them, but most of the onions that I have in here, which are 8 beds of onions all along the sides, these guys are going to be either freeze-dried, chopped and frozen, sauteed and caramelized and canned, some kind of preservation like that. So this doesn't worry me too much. I'm sure we'll keep some cured for like fresh use. But yeah, this hasn't happened a lot, so I think no matter what we decide to do with our onions, it'll be fine. Garlic is doing well. This here is elephant garlic. I don't know what this variety is. We buy this at the local grocery store and plant it every year. It is a hardneck variety, and the paper that is on the outside of the garlic cloves is a little bit purple streaked. So there's different like Russian red varieties, I think. It's one of those. I have this volunteer tomato that I decided to pretend like I didn't know was there because I like it. I mean, so far so good with the garlic. I don't really know what happened here, so when this tomato volunteered, I decided I'd leave it and we'll let that kind of bush and fall out over this way. Sometimes things don't work out as we would like in the garden, and there's usually, at least in my garden, there's usually a plant that's more than willing to take the place of the plant that I had intended to grow. You can see the strawberries that are in the greenhouse are further along than the ones that are outside. Lots of red berries. I'm sure the kids will be out here really soon to partake. This one maybe could have sat a little bit longer. We have been noticing a tiny bit of damage. It could be from birds. I'm thinking that these are supposed to scare the birds, these terror eyeballs. I think maybe I need to move them around the greenhouse a little bit, because the birds, I have seen them flying around in here, and I've seen evidence on the strawberries that they've been here. So if I move those balls around, maybe they will stay out of here longer. I'm not seeing too many right now, but I have pulled off a couple of strawberry suckers. These guys are okay. They're not gonna hurt the plant, but what this is the strawberry trying to put out a clone of itself. The strawberries can be started by seeds, but oftentimes they will spread with runners, and that's what this is. Down here on the end will be a little strawberry plant that, if it was, you know, in the ground, it would be a lot easier for the plant to put out this sucker, place it in the ground, a lot like that walking onion that I have in the other garden, and just put down roots and create a brand new strawberry plant. The reason that I'm picking these off right now is that I really want the plants to be able to be focusing on fruit set and not necessarily on these guys. We have a couple strawberries growing in the ground here, and these are here because this green stalk set out runners. See that there? That's a runner. Now I do have an empty pocket down here, so what I may do is allow these runners to go and then guide them down into that cup and help fill out the green stalk that way. So there's a time and a place to leave runners for sure. And those of you on praying mantis watch, so far the praying mantis egg capsules have not opened up. There's one here, and then there's one right there. I guess they need like a consistent amount of warm weather in order to emerge. So I've got 3 egg capsules that I know of in here that I've been watching really closely. The first one that we notice is on this peach tree here. It's right there. It has darkened up some, which I'm hoping means that it's maturing and that they'll come out soon. You can see our bitty baby peaches. I did come through here and thin out the peaches so that it has a manageable amount of fruit to mature. Yeah, when the praying mantises are ready to hatch, there's plenty of foliage in here now for them to hide out on and do good work on. This is my herb green stalk, and it is ready for me to do a harvest and preservation of the herbs very soon. We did start seeing lots of chamomile blooming, which is cool to see. I've not grown chamomile in a small space like this, so I wasn't sure what it would do. When I've grown chamomile out in my raised beds, it gets real big. I mean like 3.5 feet tall and super bushy. And so I was kind of concerned maybe I'd have to cut it down, but it looks like, you know, the plant's being packed in here with limited amount of root space has already kind of triggered them to stay small, and so they are staying small and they are flowering small, so this does work out. Now a lot of these are kind of past their prime for harvest. You really want to harvest your chamomile when the flowers are open and the petals are flat. When they bend back like this, it's just a little bit past their prime, but they're still going to be tasty. Down here is the flower that a lot of people would mistake for chamomile probably. This is fleabane. You can see that the petals on this flower are almost like little hairs, while the petals on the chamomile are a lot flatter and broader. And you can also see that the foliage is way different. This kind of leaf, which almost looks like dill, honestly, and then the fleabane has a flatter leaf like that. Fleabane is also medicinal. I can't remember for what, so if you happen to make a tea out of this, it's probably fine. But it's not nearly as fragrant as chamomile, and so that's another way to tell for sure. One thing that I noticed that I really wanted to make sure I showed you guys is that one of the thyme plants in here is variegated. Isn't that neat? This variegation is something that you don't see super often. I don't really know what causes it, but I know that when I was really heavily into succulents, I loved my variegated succulents. And so I've been watching that variegated thyme. I told my daughter, don't harvest the variegated thyme. She came out here to get some thyme for a recipe that I made yesterday. And I said, if you see that variegated thyme, leave it. Don't harvest it, I want it. But yeah, the herb green stalk really needs a haircut and a drying session. And speaking of that, this bed of onions, I have started to pull some of the onions. If you were here when we planted this bed, I planted these onions really close together. They're about 2 or 3 inches apart, which isn't going to allow for a nice bulb, but I saw it suggested in the pamphlet that I got from Dixondale that you could plant some of the onions closer together, and then midway through the season for the onions you can pluck out every other onion and use them or preserve them like green onions. So I have been doing that a little bit here and there this week, and I've got more of that to do this week. There's a lot of onions in here. Another place where I will be making harvests this week so I can reclaim my grow bag is over here. There's a lot of weeds over here, y'all. But this grow bag has carrots, and I would really like to reclaim this grow bag for something else, and so let's see what we got. Not huge, but nothing to be ashamed about. See, I'm gonna come through and harvest those, and we'll probably use them for fresh eating, and then I'm gonna reclaim that for the lane. I did manage to get this bed mulched. I do need to pick up another jalapeno at the greenhouse. I had set down 5 seeds and only 4 germinated, but you know, that's not too bad. These jalapenos, I think they're called a monster or a monstrose jalapeno. I got these from Botanical Interests. And I think that these plants are maybe not quite big enough to pop the tops off of them. You can grow your peppers without pruning the tops, and you get like a decent plant with a good amount of fruit set. But if you pinch off the top of the pepper plant, it's going to trigger the plant to put off more growth in the suckers, and it'll be a little bit of a more bushy plant, but those plants tend to set more blooms and you get a lot of fruit. Last year I tried to go peppers up a string, and I was successful. I grew them from the ground in the greenhouse up the string to this purlin right here in my greenhouse, and they did grow quite tall, and that was really neat to see, but I didn't get a lot of peppers off of those plants. I get way more peppers when I grow them out bushy, and so I don't think I'm going to do it today, but pretty soon I'll be pinching off the tops of all of these plants and encouraging them to bush out. It looks like the Malabar spinach that volunteered here is getting some really good leaf growth going on, and that's just going to grow up here and go wild and crazy. I look forward to it, but I have some cucamelons down here. This guy has grown quite a bit since I put it in here, and this one's a little bit further behind, but it's also growing. Can't wait for those to take off. You can see that the garlic is shading them out a little bit. This side is the east side of the greenhouse, and so it shades it in the morning a little bit, but these plants get plenty of sun throughout the day. There's literally nothing shading the greenhouse, and so those guys are fine, especially when they get big enough and grab a hold of the trellis and really get going. They'll have plenty of sun. Got some tomatoes over here, Sweet Million, that I bought from our local greenhouse, and they are starting to establish. Probably I'll start tying them to the trellis soon. And more beans. I had talked about replanting some of these beans because they got eaten up by roly-polies, but it looks like they've bounced back pretty okay. And we should be getting flowers soon, so I'll leave them. Somehow I feel like I'm forgetting to show you something. Hopefully not, but if I did, we'll pick it up in the garden tour in a couple weeks. We are getting to the time of year where I really need to be getting in the preservation headspace. Even if it's only things like herbs or milk. We've been having tons of milk coming in every day. I need to be thinking about preserving something every single day. Otherwise, I am going to get behind. So I'm gonna make a point to give my herbs back there a good haircut, probably pick these carrots and get some things put away. So thank you for joining me in my garden and my greenhouse and on the lane today. A lot of things are gonna be happening along the lane this week, so we'll be updating that next week, and maybe we'll have some flowers on the squash plants. I'll see you there.